Want to talk about one team that may be out of it, and this is a last week's story, but it's still relevant, is the Bengals losing Joe Burrow. Listen, the schedule's brutal. So I don't know that they're going to have a shot to stay in this thing. I don't want to count this backup quarterback out, but Cleveland is so much more well built to go on a run with a backup quarterback. It's not even close. So I worry about the Bengals, and I worry about in general these quarterbacks. I said this last week on like Thursday when the Deshaun news came out. These modern play extending quarterbacks, we keep seeing graphics of Andrew Luck and Joe Burrow, how many sacks they took over a 40-game span or a 50-game span. Deshaun Watson got hurt last week. One guy you're not seeing on graphics, he took 174 sacks the first 4 years of his career, I think it was. And, when you compare that to Joe or Andrew Luck, that's even worse. So I think sometimes we look at some of these injuries as isolated incidents, but it's the attrition of being these guys. And I also think, there were some guys in the 90s that ran the ball. Steve Young, McNair, tail end of the 90s, Culpepper at times. There were guys that ran the ball. But this is a new era where we're throwing the ball 40 times a game. O-line plays getting worse. And these guys are asked to do a lot. And Josh Allen's a guy that he's superhuman, but he has to do a ton in the run game. You worry about now projecting these guys into their 30s because of these injuries and the attrition of being a mobile guy. And there's two guys we're going to talk about today, Murray and Fields, who are auditioning not just for their teams, but for 31 other teams. And part of the thought process might be, do we want to commit to guys like this that maybe in 5 years the bottom falls out? Maybe in 3 years the bottom falls out. So it's just an interesting conversation because we're starting to see a lot of quarterbacks getting hurt, and it's an NFL problem because if you look at Sundays, and they've made it a pillow fight out there, right? They protect these guys a great deal, but you're still having these injuries, and it's hurting the bottom line for the NFL because a lot of these games are kind of unwatchable because we are dipping into the bag. We got Tim Boyle playing. We got Zach Wilson playing. We have a ton of backups playing DeVito, the whole thing. So as for the investigation into when Joe Burrow hurt his wrist, and Kyle, we haven't talked about this, but last week it's like midnight and the Burrow news comes out that he gets off the bus with a brace on. And so I'm digging in the film and it doesn't take long to find the second play. Enhance. He gets crushed between Orlando Brown and, the rush, and he's coming off the field grabbing his wrist. And so I kind of pointed that out, and nobody's really talked about this. And I think what that shows is that the NFL is not going to do anything about it. They're not going to punish these guys for withholding information on injuries because it happens all the time, I think, in the NFL. But when it's a franchise quarterback, it could be a really big deal, and they don't want to deal with that because it hurts the product. The product is gambling. Like, if you want to get mad at the Bengals about what they did, who are you? Who was wronged in that? Not the Ravens, not the Bengals.
The bettors were wrong.
The bettors.
If you're the NFL and you embrace gambling, you have to enforce these policies, or people will lose money and go crazy.
Yeah, but what is embracing gambling doesn't necessarily mean it's like gospel to us as an NFL. So, like, if I'm the NFL, if I'm the Bengals, I'm like, fuck those gambling guys.
No, but if you're the NFL, the protocol. There's a lot of people that putting $20 down is it's a big deal. On a Sunday.
I'm not saying that's not a big deal.
No, I know. I'm not saying that. That's not what you're saying.
But the NFL shit is their stance, and I would say a cover your ass stance would be, that's not our deal.
Yeah,
We're the NFL.
But it is your deal now because you have accepted gambling as a big stream of revenue. So I think what I could gauge by the lack of talking about what I talked about last week, because it's obvious to me, he got hurt in the Houston game. People can say it was it was the Clowney hit, but the guys that got killed were the gamblers. And, I think the media got a memo where they're we're not talking about this.
I can tell you, I
haven't heard one person talk about the Houston game other than me.
Well, Camus in the chat just said that Schefter shouted you out on McAfee for having
cool.
that.
What was that? What day?
Today.
Oh, nice. Thank you, Adam.
Hey.
Well, so we're talking about it a little bit. But the NFL needs to be concerned about this stuff. They really do.